Hey, Dog Nation, my name is Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and glad to have you with us. There is a lot to get to on today's show. We'll have Terrence Edwards stopping by, as we do on many of these Thursdays. We'll talk JT Daniels off the very top today, and we'll mention the name of Rick Gilbert on this show for the first time in a while, but it seems appropriate to do that. I'll tell you why as we're together. And really good stuff last night. Four-star running back Branson Robinson, who first of all just comes across as like the most impressive recruit you could ever imagine. If you didn't already like the idea of Robinson as a running back for Georgia's 2022 class, the interview that Jeff did with him last night, I think will make you feel even more strongly about that. So we'll do all of that. Some interesting stuff from David Pollack before we're done on today's show. We're going to cram a bunch of stuff into the next hour or so, and we're happy to have you with us as we do it. It's Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of Dog Nation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DogNation.com. This is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I'm going to tell you something off the top of the show today that you probably won't be surprised to hear. At this stage of my life, kind of early 40s, wife, kids, I don't go to a lot of clubs anymore. There was a time, believe it or not, when I actually was not in my 40s and did not have kids. And, back then, you kind of go out a little bit. You do a little thing here and there. I don't do that much anymore, but I have actually done that in the past. Some of you may be somewhat surprised to even hear that. And it's always kind of weird when you're waiting in line to get into the club and you sort of feel like the guy at the front's kind of looking you up and down, trying to decide if you're dressed well enough to go in. And, I'm not one of these people that's good looking enough as it is to just kind of skate past any of these velvet ropes. That's why I had to make sure I dressed the right way. Otherwise, I was going to be kind of left, on the outside looking in. Maybe some of you have experienced that before, too. My reason for saying that is sometimes I sort of think about college football as kind of a club there as well, that if you want to get into the national championship club, if you want to get past those velvet ropes, if you want to get into the college football playoff conversation, there are just certain prerequisites you have to have, like good-looking clothes or whatever else. There's certain things you just sort of have to have if you want to be a part of that conversation. You've heard me say over and over again that there is a clear connection right now between high-powered offense and national champions, and obviously that is led by kind of that big-time, high-level performer at the quarterback position. We all understand that. And I begin today's show with some good news because a lot of you know I love the college football preview magazines. Athlon Sports is one of those. It's really one of my favorites. I'll be reading that a lot as we kind of head towards pool season and being outside at the beach later on this summer and everything that goes along with that. The editor of the Athlon Sports College Football Preview magazine, Stephen Lassen, joined me yesterday on SEC Country Live, and I hope that you are checking out SEC Country Live every Wednesday afternoon on the SEC Country Facebook and SEC Country Live YouTube pages. A lot of you have given me great feedback about that, and I appreciate you being a part of the show. And yesterday, in a wide-ranging conversation with Stephen about a lot of the things related to how the SEC projects for this upcoming season, the name of JT Daniels at quarterback for Georgia came up, and Stephen Lassen says that when he looks at JT Daniels, he definitely sees one of those quarterbacks capable of getting Georgia past the velvet ropes of all the, also ran pretenders into the actual contender status in the VIP section of the club. Stephen Lassen says he absolutely sees JT Daniels as the kind of guy that could get Georgia there. This is Stephen.
No question about it. We've seen that difference makers at quarterback drive college football now. Joe Burrow was the reason that LSU perked up and won the national championship, was able to unseat Alabama. Look what's gone on at Alabama. Tua, Mac Jones. There's an offensive revolution underway in the SEC. It's no longer just about having a good defense and running game. You have to have a difference maker at the quarterback position. I think JT Daniels can be that guy.
So I think it's really interesting that Stephen Lassen calls him a difference maker there. That's obviously what you have to have, somebody that's the difference between being 10-2 in the regular season, 11-3 after the SEC championship game, whatever, kind of numbers you want to kind of throw out there, or, whatever the record would end up being there, just on the outside looking into the college football playoff versus actually being back in that playoff again. The difference maker at quarterback would make, as the word would suggest, all the difference. But as I told you, I think it was on a show last week, that Athlon itself, the group that Stephen Lassen is the editor for, they themselves, though, have told us that they only see right now, at least based on the preseason projections, JT Daniels as the third best quarterback in the SEC. In their all SEC teams that are available online at athlonsports.com, they only had Daniels as the third team all SEC quarterback behind Bryce Young from Alabama and Matt Corral from Ole Miss, who they actually had as their first team all SEC quarterback. And I've told you on the show that, listen, if Daniels is only the third best quarterback in the SEC, then that might not actually be good enough to get it done for Georgia this year. That you got to be better than third best in the SEC if you want to really see Georgia at its highest and best in terms of its offensive output. However, Steven Lassan, who was obviously part of the construction of those all-SEC teams, did push back on that notion a little bit yesterday on SEC Country Live for a very specific reason. Here's a little bit more from Steven on that topic.
We think Bryce Young, we think JT Daniels, we think Matt Corral are all going to be in the mix to kind of be a third, fourth team All-America. So when we say second or third team All-SEC, we're talking about the best of the best in college football. And so we're projecting both Bryce Young and JT Daniels to have that type of season. But when you look back at last year, JT Daniels in his starts, Georgia averaged just over a touchdown more a game than they did with anyone else under center. So his impact was clear, and it's not just the scoreboard, it's how different he can make this offense. He can push the ball down the field, averaging over 10 yards per attempt. Those are all kind of things that Georgia has to get out of its quarterback position, and I think he can be that guy.
So I think it's really interesting from Steven Lassan there from Athlon Sports, who says, yeah, it may be true that JT Daniels is only third best quarterback in the SEC, but you could be, as Lassan points out, third best quarterback in the SEC and be like the fourth or fifth best quarterback in the entire country, just given the overall depth of the SEC. And I think that's really a pretty interesting point. Now, what that leads us to is this. Well, then how do you judge JT Daniels then? If you're going to have other high-powered, big-time quarterbacks in the SEC, Bryce Young filling in the shoes of Mac Jones at Alabama, what Matt Corral is expected to do, maybe somebody else emerging around this league there as well. What do you really watch for from JT Daniels to determine if he really is, to use the phrase that Steven Lassan used, the difference maker at quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs? And to me, this conversation once again returns to something we've said before. I think you can judge JT Daniels on how good he makes the players around him. If you want to use that phrase again, difference maker at quarterback, then be the difference that makes Darnell Washington not just kind of a fringe all-SEC tight end, but one of the most prominent pass-catching weapons in this league. Same thing for Jermaine Burton, who we've talked about before. Veteran player like Kearis Jackson. Incoming freshman like Adonai A.D. Mitchell, if you want to kind of get into all that. Take some of these guys, the speedster of Arian Smith, if you want to bring him into the discussion. Take some of those guys, make the difference for them from being talented players who have potential to actually looking like finished products who are going out there and getting it done for Georgia offensively. That's a way to judge JT Daniels. And by the way, Steven Lassan from Athlon Sports certainly seems to see that as a possibility because he seems to really like what JT Daniels has around him. A little bit more from SEC Country Live yesterday.
And I also think what helps him is the playmakers around him at receiver. Yes, George Pickens is injured and out indefinitely, but I really like guys like Darnell Washington, Jermaine Burton. You throw in Arian Smith and some of the other guys, that receiving core for Georgia is loaded. So I think everything is really in place for this offense to take off, especially, too, they have a full offseason to work under Todd Monken, and I think we'll see the benefit of all that this year.
Yeah, so listen, I think you can bottom line this pretty simply. If JT Daniels is as good as Steven Lassan describes there, and I have every reason to believe that he can be, as good as the very best quarterbacks in the SEC, which would make him among the very best quarterbacks in the country, then it ought to show up in the performance of those playmakers that he just mentioned, working with Todd Monken in year two. Listen, I'm not going to lie. I do like the idea of national writer, editor for big magazine saying we're very high on the Georgia offense. That's clearly the path you have to travel towards a national championship if you want to get there. And even after the George Pickens injury, one of the national guys who kind of peers in on this seems to think Georgia's right there in the mix. I take that as really good news. Now, with all of that said, let me kind of go to something completely different here for a moment. And I have to admit that we have not talked about a Rick Gilbert much lately because I guess I was under the belief that after he kind of chose to enter the transfer portal from LSU, then committed to Florida, then decommitted from Florida. It sort of seemed like to me that he might be going his way back to LSU, or he might be just doing something completely different, but it certainly seemed like he was not coming to Georgia. I think, if anything, we probably waved the white flag a little bit on that, but the idea that Gilbert, the former five-star prospect, tight end, if you want to call him that, receiver even, if you want to call him that, just given the way the modern game has seemingly changed here, a player and a prospect that I've always really liked, would love to have had at Georgia, and yet you're kind of left to believe that it was just not going to work out for Gilbert coming to UGA. However, there's new life being breathed in this story here today, and one of the videos I like online, it's kind of been turned into a meme. I don't really know where it even comes from. It's the casket on the back of the truck, and the casket door flies open. The guy sits up out of it and stands up and starts walking and kind of doing the Thriller dance on the back of the flatbed truck out of the casket, literally coming back to life again. For some reason, that video comes to my mind in thinking about this, because apparently things are not quite dead for Georgia when it comes to a Rick Gilbert, at least if you believe certain corners of the media. Mike Farrell, writing a piece, or Farrell, however you say it, writing a piece for Rivals.com, mentions Gilbert and Georgia in the same sentence recently. This is worth me reading, and I'll put a link to the entire story. You can read it for free at Rivals.com. I'll put a link to the entire story when I post the show later on today at the world-famous DogNation.com. But what Farrell writes about Rick Gilbert is that some expect him to be back at LSU this week as players arrive for summer workouts. Admittedly, I guess I was probably one of those people, just based on what I'd kind of heard prior to all of this. But Farrell says apparently Gilbert is not at LSU right now. And Farrell goes on to say, now I hear Georgia and Tennessee rumors. Let me tell you something. Ain't nobody going to Tennessee. But nonetheless, he says, I hear Georgia and Tennessee rumors. Let me read the rest of that if you don't mind. Again, and I don't know what to think, Mike Farrell says. But he does say this, the one-time school that held the commitment for Gilbert coming out of the transfer portal, Mike Farrell from Rival says, no, Gators fans, your team isn't in this anymore, which makes Gilbert very similar to a lot of other five-star prospects who Florida's simply only a spectator in their recruitment. So very interesting stuff there from Mike Farrell at Rivals.com saying, I'm starting to hear some Georgia stuff related to Rick Gilbert again. Now, I'll take the Tennessee thing seriously, even though I would be somewhat skeptical of that, because obviously Farrell originally called the Florida thing. And we kind of gave him a little bit of a hard time for that. And he ended up being right about that. So we'll give him a little bit of credit for that there. But the point of all of this is maybe not dead yet for Rick Gilbert in Georgia. I don't know. This seems like really fun stuff. We obviously talked a lot about Darian Kendrick yesterday, the former Clemson defensive back. Now you have seemingly reason to talk once again about Rick Gilbert here right now. I'm not quite so sure where all of this is heading, but listen. What is it they say in poker? A chip in a chair. You know, as long as you got a chip in a chair, you got a chance here. So we'll follow this and see where it goes. I'll also ask Terrence Edwards about this coming up in a moment, because if anybody would know, Terrence might. And of course, it's great to have all of you with us here today. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref Podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, worldfamousdognation.com, SoundCloud. Gosh, just about every platform in the world you can find our show on. I'm really glad to have all these platforms out there because we want to be able to deliver the content to you. And obviously, we would not be able to do that if not for our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. I had a chance to see our good buddy Bob Tharp and his great wife Ashley. They were with us for Dog Nation Days of Summer this past Friday. So much fun to hang out with them. And obviously, just so appreciative I am of the work that they do for so many of the people in our audience. Because let's face it, an audience the size of ours, statistically speaking, a lot of you have either gone through the divorce process or you find yourself potentially in the midst of having to go through this, and that's a tough situation. We all understand that, but here's one thing I've come to believe, is that you want the next season of your life to be better and more enjoyable than maybe what the current season is, and the things you do now make that better for you over the course of the long run. That means putting somebody to work for you that not only understands the intricacies of the law, but also in how those laws can have real life implications and applications in your own life. So that's what Merriweather and Tharp is good at doing. They are your source for Georgia divorce. And the reason why they are that is because they've been through situations like this thousands of times. So please put them to work for you. Take that initial consultation. That's free. Take advantage of the free resources they have. The podcast, the blog posts. And I think one of the things that can be helpful about those free resources is it can actually inform you about better questions to ask when you do that initial consultation. So please do all of that and reach out online. The first step belongs to you. Then after that, they'll take all the steps for you. It's the AtlantaDivorceTeam.com, the AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. Meriwether and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. All right, it will be Terrence Edwards coming up in a little bit. We'll find out from him if he can shed any new light on the situation with the Rick Gilbert situation. Terrence and Rick are obviously close with each other. Before we do that, though, let's go around the doghouse. And I got to tell you this. I told our video audience this before our show started today. I already liked Branson Robinson, the running back out of the great state of Mississippi, and already kind of thought that he'd be a nice fit for the Georgia recruiting class, for class of 2022. But when you watch Before the Hedges presented by Kroger last night, let me tell you something. Robinson comes across as like one of the great dudes you could ever possibly be involved with. First of all, very mature. Like if you told me he was recruiting other players, like if he was the coach recruiting the players, I believe I might believe that. If he was your next door neighbor and he had like 3 kids and a wife of 10 years, I think I might believe that there as well. Just a very mature presence, kind of comes across as much older, than someone who's, going into a senior year of high school. This is a very, very impressive guy. Every kind of look and feel, he seems exactly like the kind of running back that ought to be here at the University of Georgia. And obviously right now it seems like Georgia is in the driver's seat in his recruitment, because there is like a rare level of honesty with the way that Branson Robinson talked about all this. A lot of guys try to keep their cards close to the vest. A lot of the guys try to maybe in some cases be intentionally misleading about where their recruitment is heading. In the case of Robinson, that's not what's going on here. Robinson has been very clear that right now, going into a visit season, visits that he wants to take advantage of, by the way, but going into this visit season, he's been made it very clear that right now he views UGA as his lead school. Let me let you hear Branson Robinson last night Before the Hedges presented by Kroger.
It's no secret now. It's number one right now. But, I just want to get the feel for everything. I just want to go down there, see how everything is, because, I just don't want to. If I commit there, I just don't want to be there the first time I go down there. After I commit, I want to see how everything is, and that's all that is.
So listen, I have no problem with Robinson saying, listen, my visits matter to me. I want to make sure that what I experience in real life, in person, matches what I've kind of done virtually over the course of the last whatever year plus. And, these guys for the class of 2022, we said this before, the 2022 class is a little bit different than the 2021 class. The 2021 guys had their senior year taken from them, but they took a lot of visits in many cases their junior year. For a lot of the 2022 guys, they're moving into their senior year and they're still not taking visits after not having them at all last year either. I think the coronavirus pandemic is impacting the 2022 class in terms of the visits they haven't been able to take, in some ways even more than an impact of the 2021 class. Now, they're going to have, all kinds of opportunities here in the future, but let's not forget just how much the global pandemic has impacted 2022 recruiting, arguably even more so than 2021. So Robinson's absolutely earned the right to take all these visits, but the fact that he says, listen, right now I do have a pecking order, a hierarchy, and Georgia is number one on that list, I think you can't help but appreciate the honesty, even if part of that honesty is kind of what we want to hear. I think you can't help but appreciate that from him. And with Jeff Sentell yesterday, he went into a little bit more detail about exactly why that's true. Some very, very strong words of praise here for Georgia running backs coach Dell McGee. You'll like this as well.
Why is Georgia still your number one? It's just the relationship with, different coaches, Coach Smart, Coach McGee, pretty much the whole coaching staff. And it's just the bond that I got, especially with Coach McGee, just talk about certain things and stuff like that. Not on and off the field. Sometimes it's just about life and stuff like that. So, it's just really the coaching staff that really pulls me towards Georgia right now.
How would you describe your relationship with Coach McGee?
I would say he's more like another father, I would say. Nobody is your father, but, we talk about things, not things like considering football. Some things he talk about his wife and kids and talk about how my day went at school and how my grades are and stuff like that. It's just certain stuff like that.
I think that's what the really good recruiters are really good at doing. I've always kind of equated recruiting with like a little bit of a sales thing, and the best salesmen are always going to be those guys who don't make it seem obvious they're trying to sell you. Salespeople are really good at doing that. The good ones are able to kind of present their pitch without kind of feeling like you're being pitched. And In the case of McGee, a salesman for the Georgia football program, you see the same thing kind of working here, where it's like, hey, I'm going to develop a relationship with you because I want to be in a relationship with you, and hopefully that all kind of just makes sense for you to then come to Georgia and kind of further that relationship with me over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. It is not surprising to hear a guy like Dell McGee really good at that. And, you know, when he really, really kind of sinks his, his teeth into a recruitment, boy, it really seems to make a big difference. In the case of Robinson here, that seems to be the case there as well. I'll invite you to check out the full edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger to get the full interview from Jeff Sentell. I'll also put a link to that when I post the show a little bit later on today. But good stuff with Jeff, Branson Robinson. We'll talk to Jeff about that and a whole lot more when he joins us there tomorrow there as well. But for now, here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, let's find out everything else happening around UGA. Always fun on a Thursday to talk to the former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards. Let's do that right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DogNation.com insider.
We will say hello to Terrence Edwards. Always great to have the former Georgia wide receiver here with us on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and always a lot of fun. Terrence, hope you're enjoying your summer. I know summers are busy for you because, you know, you're out there coaching and doing all that hard work and everything that goes along with that, but certainly hope you're enjoying all of that, and we appreciate you spending a little time with us here today.
Thanks, B.A. You know, it's always a pleasure.
I want to ask you about some other stuff. Let me squeeze this in here real quick because we were just hearing from Branson Robinson. I don't know how much you've had a chance to pay attention to Robinson, the running back out of Mississippi, but boy, what an impressive young man he is. Physically developed, mature, seemingly beyond his years there. Pretty impressive guy all the way around. I realize that's not quite maybe necessarily, you know, in your sphere because, you know, he's a running back, not a wide receiver. But, boy, you hear interviews like that with Robinson, easy to understand why a guy like that would be clearly on Georgia and Dell McGee's radar. Pretty impressive young man all the way around there.
Oh, I try to keep my hands on everyone, O-line, D-line, doesn't matter. I just try to keep the pulse on Georgia recruiting, period. And I've watched this young man film a few times. I actually showed it to my brother. And I mean, if you just look at his physique, that's the first thing that pops out at you. If you look at his film, I think he's a combination of Zamir coming out of high school and Nick, just the way Nick looks. He has a cutting ability and a acceleration ability that what makes him the number one running back in the country. And hopefully Coach McGee is gonna, you know, do his pitch and land that young man, because he is what running back you is, and he would be a great addition to that room.
All right, great stuff there. So, Terrence, I was honest with our audience before you joined us that I'd pretty much stopped talking about a Rick Gilbert, even though I'm a huge fan of Gilbert, and selfishly I'd love for Gilbert to have landed at Georgia. But, you know, just given kind of the way that his recruitment played out after entering the transfer portal, I was kind of left to believe, well, I guess this must just not going to happen. But all of a sudden now you start to hear some of these news reports and a little bit of rumor stuff here and there that maybe, you know, Gilbert is still on the open market and maybe Georgia has a chance to land him. Is there anything new you can tell us about this situation? And should UGA fans remain at least, you know, kind of piqued with their interest that maybe Gilbert could still be in play for the Bulldogs?
One thing I can tell you that right now, Eric is in peak condition. I mean, he's been training this offseason with me and strength and conditioning coach JT, and he's in peak shape, mind, body, and soul. He's back to the guy that I've known since the 9th grade, where I was trained since the 9th grade, and he has options. Where that option would be, I try to stay out of that with the guys because I don't want anyone to come to the conclusion that I'm just sending guys to Georgia. Sure. I give my pros and cons, and I leave it up to his family to make that decision with him. And if he asks, I would give, but if he don't, or any of the athletes, then I don't. I just try to kind of stay out of that, kind of stay neutral. But I do know he has options, and he hasn't led to me to believe either way. I don't know, but I can't wait to find out, just like everyone else.
What is the thing about Gilbert that maybe those of us who try to follow his story, and obviously, I mean, I've been impressed with Rick going back to his, you know, time in high school. He's just a, you know, really good-looking prospect now. I'm happy to hear you say that, hey, he's in, you know, great physical condition and wherever he plays this fall, ready to play well while there. What is it about Gilbert that maybe those of us who only see him on video or watch him on TV or maybe met him briefly, what is it about Gilbert that maybe we don't know and don't understand? Because obviously, this is kind of a complicated story. When you go to LSU, you seemingly were unhappy at one point. You then go to transfer to Florida, although that doesn't quite work out. There's been a lot of people try to tell Gilbert's story, but what Gilbert in his own words, or you knowing him personally, what is it about Rick Gilbert that we should maybe understand more that we don't quite know?
Eric is a very quiet and reserved kind of guy. He doesn't really like the spotlight. He's not that type of guy that is, with this whole process is trying to seek attention. He's just not that type of guy at all. He's a guy, he would leave his cell phone at the training facility and just forget it because stuff like that just does not appease to him. He's just a quiet, he's very into his family, with his mom, and to his friends. He kind of stay away from everyone else if you're not in his inner circle. Doesn't trust a lot of people, but the people he do trust, he trusts them hard. So for people who don't know, he's just a quiet, reserved guy, just trying to make the best decision for himself and his family.
So let me shift gears here, and Terrence, this just coming out, and I want to appreciate Connor Riley, our producer for today, to helping us stay on top of this. So Josh Brooks has announced, following in the footsteps of a lot of other SEC teams who made similar announcements, that Georgia does plan to be at full capacity for the first home game of the season, which will be week 2 this year against UAB. So full crowd for Georgia Clemson. The Carolina Panthers have recently announced that. A lot of other SEC teams announcing their plans for full attendance. Now Georgia joins in and does the same thing. Terrence, how big is it for these players who, have played in front of empty stadiums or near empty stadiums a lot last year, and we just know the energy is so different when you're talking about full fans. Just even watching some of the NBA playoff stuff over the course of the last couple of nights. The feeling around those games now in the kind of the home gyms of the NBA teams as opposed to the bubble atmosphere from a year ago. How much of these players you think looking forward to having the roar of the crowd after big plays and the noise on defense, try to draw these teams off offensively? How much of these players looking forward to having that full crowd again? And how happy are you to hear that UGA is on its way to doing that against UAB for its first home game of this upcoming season?
It's a plus. I always have these conversations on Twitter with fans of all sports, and I'm just like. I think fans may think I don't like them because I just think sometimes fans think they're entitled to owning the players or come off as, because I bought a ticket, I get to say and do what I want. A la last night with Russell Westbrook. But with that being said, this is big, man. We as athletes appreciate the fans being there. You give us energy. We love the attendance. We won't like to play in a stadium with 100 people in it. That's just like practice. We love the energy and the roar of the crowd, especially at Sanford Stadium. So I'm happy that the fans will get to enjoy Saturdays in Athens because there's nothing else like it.
So you're telling me that you do want to have a full stadium, but you don't want popcorn dumped on you. Is that what you're saying, Terrence? As a former player? Correct. And I also saw on Twitter today that popcorn and hot dogs is going to be half price this year, so that's another reason to get everyone back into the stands and be able to enjoy half-price popcorn and hot dogs. Yeah, that's all really good stuff all the way around there. Fun to think about that for Georgia as we head towards the upcoming season here. Terrence, yesterday one of the things we talked about a little bit was Darian Kendrick, former Clemson defensive back, who seems like another one of these transfers that could potentially be in the mix for UGA, and yet there's also some questions lingering around him, why it was that he left the Clemson program. He's got some legal trouble to deal with after an arrest issue going back to March that it did involve a weapons charge. Sounds like there might be kind of a path towards maybe getting some of that, kind of cleared up and maybe having those charges dropped, maybe even in the most optimistic sense of all of this. As a former player, what is your perspective on, when you extend that second chance opportunity, what it is that you're willing to kind of forgive and be willing to kind of give that guy, whether it be Kendrick or anybody else. This is ranging just beyond beyond even Darian Kendrick. What are your thoughts on that when that player looks to football for a way to rebound over maybe a couple of issues in his life that he'd like to have back?
Let's just be real, right, BA? We always speak the truth on
Sure.
on the show, And if you could play, you have a bigger leash. That's just in all aspects of sports. If you could play and you could help me win, you have a bigger leash. If he couldn't play as well as he can play, he wouldn't probably have any opportunity or not opportunity at a Power 5 school like Georgia. So I know the staff in the school will do their due diligence. They're not just going to bring in some guy that's going to not represent the university like it should be represented. That's first and foremost. But he's a talented guy. If he's going to be able to help me win as a teammate, if he's going to come in and help me win and not be a big distraction, I'm all for it. Life is about second chances, and I think he should get if everything works out and he's clear and admitted into the university, he should get a second chance.
Yeah, I would agree with you on all that for sure. Let me finish with one more thing here. We talked about JT Daniels a little bit before you joined us, and my belief is that you can judge Daniels and his success this year not just by his own stats, but by the stats of the offensive players who get a chance to play with him. If he's truly a difference-making quarterback, then he'll make a difference for guys like Darnell Washington and Jermaine Burton and Justin Robinson and A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith and all the players who'll be catching balls from him. Is that something that you would join me in also saying that, hey, the big-time quarterbacks are going to turn their receiving targets into big-time players there as well, and that's kind of the way that we'll evaluate Daniels for this upcoming season. Would you agree with that sentiment?
I think so. I think he has the weapons to do what Alabama did last year, or what LSU did the year before. Will we have those type numbers? I don't know if Kirby's going to, and company's we're going to have those type numbers, but I think the offense is going to be very explosive. We have playmakers at every position, at running back, at tight end, at receiver. We have playmakers. Now, JT just have to do his job and give those playmakers the opportunity to be successful and do what they're brought there to do, is be a playmaker on the outside. So I think this probably, as overall, is probably one of the deepest teams that we've had talent-wise at all those positions. Because I think the receiver position is set. The tight end position is set, and the running back position is set as well. And now everyone just has to do their job, and we'll be successful in my mind.
Well, Terrence, that's a great sentiment and a great way to close out our conversation. I do want to remind folks, as I said before, you're working hard this summer getting folks ready for their upcoming high school season or getting guys ready for their eventual transition to college there as well. And if families want their son to kind of get some of that, pass-catching skills and have those talents developed the way that you do, how can they reach out and find you online?
Yeah, you can reach me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Great stuff, Terrence. I hope you enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you soon.
Thanks, B.A.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, really good stuff from Terrence Edwards there. Fascinating all the way around. Very interesting insight into Rick Gilbert, obviously knowing him close. And listen, you kind of also respect, Terrence here on this too. It's like, obviously Terrence is a huge fan of UGA. You can't listen to him speak without knowing that, and yet he also wants to be professional. He wants to be a guy that can be a coach to players who go to schools beyond just the University of Georgia, so he wants to be careful not to be seen as swaying somebody to a particular school, and I certainly understand that, respect that, and frankly, I'm happy to have, as Terrence said, we try to keep it real on the show here. I'm happy for his honesty and insight, whether it comes to the Gilbert situation or what he said about Darian Kendrick there. Terrence is a very valuable resource for us when it comes to a Dog Nation Daily presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and very good stuff there just a moment ago. You also heard the announcement during the interview with Terrence that Josh Brooks, the UGA AD, has said full crowd for UAB, second week of the season for Sanford Stadium there. This all a part of what is the University of Georgia Athletic Association Board of Directors meetings going on here at the Lake Oconee Lodge Reynolds Plantation. Very nice getaway there. The board meeting, they do this once a year, and so there's going to be some news kind of coming out of all of this. I did see where Georgia reporter Seth Emerson has tweeted out that they're also going to change the press box at Sanford Stadium. They're going to be moving that to the side. I'm going to be self-serving for 2 seconds, but I'm also going to make this a larger point there as well. As someone who sits in the press box with the rest of the Coastal Elite Media, I am so sad about this because y'all would not believe how good the press box seats are. There are a lot of press box seats now in the SEC that are frankly pretty crummy. They're either way up high or way off to the side. Georgia's press box seats are right at the 50-yard line. I mean, like, you could not have a better seat. It's literally the best seat in the house is the Georgia press box. So they're going to move that and make room for some premium seating there. So I'm obviously sad about that because I'm losing what has been a very, very nice seat to enjoy the games. But beyond that, to not be quite such a self-serving media guy for a second, the other thing that I hear from a lot of Georgia fans is that it's way easier as a donor to move up the pecking order in terms of away games or neutral site games like the Clemson game coming up. Georgia's actually getting, it would seem, a good number of tickets for this Clemson game coming up. And I've had people tell me that the actual cutoff to get these Clemson tickets is not quite as high as you might think it would be because it's just a little bit easier for the away games. Georgia-Florida is kind of much the same way. Neutral site game, you don't have to be, the monopoly man in terms of your donor status to be able to to kind of get that Georgia-Florida game. But when it comes to moving up to better seats at Sanford Stadium, I've had people tell me, and I'm going to overstate this slightly, but it's just virtually impossible, right? You can kind of select a seat that's more appealing to you, but this idea that you kind of change categories, you go from like 300 level, to good seats in the 100 level, or certainly if you're trying to get some of those chairback seats in kind of the club level area, that it's just virtually impossible to do that because of how many kind of like legacy long-time donors have had those. So one of the things that Georgia's been, I think, kind of seeking a remedy for, and I'm kind of just piecing all this together just based on people that I've talked to, is you've got to create another premium seating option to open up more seats for other people because the incentive to give when it comes to better home tickets, there's not a huge incentive there because it's just harder to get better tickets because the people who have them are not relinquishing them. I've heard that a lot. Many of you kind of experienced the same thing. So as much as I'm obviously sad to see the press box turned into premium seating, meaning I'll be, moved somewhere else in the stadium, I do kind of understand why it happens because there's obviously money to be made there. But it's not just the money from these premium seats. It's taking people who are sitting in other premium sections, moving them here, and now you've got more incentive to get, money raised for the program to slide people in there. So this is ongoing. Lake Oconee here today. Our buddy John Stinchcomb is on the board, so we'll probably talk to him next week about some of the stuff that goes on with all of this. But obviously reporting continues throughout the day on that, and we'll continue to monitor that here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Let me also say this when it comes to everything else going on around the SEC here for a moment. So there was also news from the SEC yesterday related to the CBS schedule comes out. We do find out a couple of the games for CBS. Obviously, one of those is Georgia-Florida. It's customary time, 3:30 there on October 30th. Obviously, we do our Gatorade countdown on the show each and every day. And, CBS has been a good partner for this game. There's some obvious reasons why they don't want the game to ever be at night or anything like that because, a couple of years in the early 2000s when it was, there was obviously some, unfortunate things that kind of, went on in relationship to that. It is clearly a very big party outside the stadium, so they like the 3:30 time for that. The fact that CBS makes this one of their announced games before the start of any season, I guess also joining Arkansas, Missouri, which was another one of the games that was announced. Florida, Alabama also gets a 3:30 nod for the upcoming season there as well. But every single year well before the season begins, CBS announces Georgia-Florida at 3:30 there. Just kind of a reminder, this is not a game just like any other. This is not one of those things that's just another SEC Saturday, two rivals getting together. There is a little bit of prestige and a little bit of, panache, if that's the right word, that's kind of associated with the cocktail party that, to be honest with you, I don't think would exist if these were just two teams playing on campus each and every other year. I understand why some people would eventually like to see this game played back on campus again, and I think there is a growing number of Georgia fans who probably feel that way. I don't believe it's the majority right now. I think the majority still prefer the cocktail party overall, and I think certainly the majority kind of understand that you make this game special by the atmosphere that you create around it. It's really unlike anything else in college football. And I'll also point out that even Kirby Smart himself, when he was most recently asked about this on the Paul Feinbaum show a couple of weeks ago, also had seemingly kind of softened his stance a little bit. At one point in time, it seemed fairly obvious that Smart would like to move the game. It was not quite as obvious hearing him speak on the Feinbaum show the other day. So pretty interesting stuff related to all of that. A couple other things here real quick. So the SEC baseball tournament's ongoing. Georgia did not play a good game yesterday against Arkansas. They are eliminated there, and we'll kind of wait to find out their postseason fate beyond that. Not a very good game. Also, controversy involving Tennessee and Alabama. I guess you get a little third Saturday in October, feel there in Hoover yesterday for the baseball deal. And there was an interference play called on a runner going to second, kind of a would-be double play. Arm gets up, impacts the throw. Everybody was watching this that seems to be kind of a neutral observer, says the right call was made. There was another incident later on that night, similar play where it was not called, but I guess you chalk that up more as inconsistent than anything else. A lot of Tennessee fans are on social media, as Vols fans would tend to do, saying this is just more SEC bias. If this is SEC bias in favor of Alabama, I think Bama baseball fans wonder why it's taken this long to get there, because I don't think Alabama's been good at baseball for 30 years. So if there's bias in favor of Alabama in baseball, I think Crimson Tide fans are kind of wondering how they haven't been able to plug into that a little bit more. But kind of interesting to see the SEC, as they say on the internet, the SEC is going to SEC no matter what, and got a little controversy there in Hoover related to that with the Vols and the Crimson Tide. By the way, speaking of controversial, and speaking of Tennessee, former Tennessee assistant who had a little bit of an issue there, and a little bit of a colorful past all the way around. Shelton Felton has been hired as Valdosta coach. Felton, a well-known guy, one-time Crisp County head coach there as well. I just love the fact that Valdosta, after everything that happened with their previous coach, then hiring Rush Probst and everything that went on there, the idea of, hey, maybe we should just kind of keep things a little quiet, maybe not, make too big of a splash with our current hire here and all of that. I love the idea that they're not the least bit worried about that there. They'll go out there and make a big hire and kind of a big splash name. We've got a little bit of a controversial, a little bit of controversy connected to his name there, but Shelton Felton hired as a Valdosta head football coach. It will make that your SEC through. And here on Dog Nation Daily, let me also give a quick shout out to my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Obviously, we had a great time hanging out with the ESOG a little earlier this week. With your foundation waterproofing needs, they are great at being able to do that for you. Easy to get in touch with you. You can simply give them a call, 678-ESOG-NOW. That number, once again, 678-ESOG-NOW. If you've got a small fix, they'll tell you how to fix it. If you've got a big fix, and sometimes these things are, you want to trust them because they have 2 full-time engineers on staff. They are also proud partners of UGA, longtime friends of ours on Dog Nation Daily. As Jay said in the video the other day, so many of our folks in our audience have reached out to trust them, and I am so happy to see them taking so much good care of so many people there. So check out Engineered Solutions of Georgia today. Give them a call, 678-ESOG-NOW. Make sure you tell them that Dog Nation Daily sent you. All right, Connor, if you don't mind, I was going to do a David Pollock story here today. We are running just a little bit late because of the new news that crept in here. Let me instead give a quick shout-out here. Adam Schefter on Twitter reaching out and letting us know that Todd Gurley, really good stuff, honored for some community service out there in L.A. Gurley, nice to see that he's still kind of a big part of that community. L.A. Mayor Eric Garcetti honoring Todd Gurley, according to Adam Schefter, for his efforts in providing access to medical and mental health services to those in need in the L.A. area. So nice to see Gurley, who's now obviously out of the L.A. Rams, the team that he was famous for playing, but still making an impact there in that L.A. community. That's a great thing to see, and a great job by Todd Gurley there. So that was a David Pollock story I was going to do on today's show, but we'll wait and do that tomorrow when we have a little bit more time to kind of stretch into that. Pretty interesting quotes from Pollock as of late. We'll share those with you then. For now, though, let's do the way we always do as we wrap up our show, Gator Hater Roll Call. We love the Gator haters in our audience. I got a very funny tweet from Bank 6. I want to honor him as our Golden Shoe winner for today, referencing a tweet from the media entity known as The Hill about an alligator that was described as unathletic with terrible arthritis that was located after escaping from Wisconsin Zoo. Big Bank, our buddy Bank 6 on Twitter says, sounds like that was one of the Dan Mullen recruits there. Yeah, unathletic, terrible arthritis. I feel like I've seen some Florida players who might fit that description here a little bit over the last couple of years. Pretty good stuff from Bank 6 there. You're our Golden Shoe winner for today. How about Gator Hater Countdown? Georgia back in Jacksonville, coming up 156 days from right now. They get some revenge against those lousy, stinking Gators. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. Dog Nation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I should also tell you this. I meant to mention this in the regular show. That Monday being Memorial Day, we will be off Monday and then back on Tuesday. So apologize for no show on Monday, but my kids are super excited about the summer, and I told them we would do something fun here this weekend. So we're going to take off on Monday for the holiday, and we'll be back with you on Tuesday and try to cover all of that. And there'll be a lot to cover because there's a lot of news coming out today related to, athletic board meeting and everything else with that. So full capacity, making some changes to Sanford Stadium. Could be more news coming out here too. So we'll stay close to all that here on Dog Nation as we kind of roll through all of that. All right, let's get some YouTube comments maybe first today. I think I did Facebook first yesterday. I honestly don't remember. All right, on YouTube, let's see how people are doing. Josh Crafton says, where do you think Julio Jones may go? I think that's a really good question. I guess you hear Baltimore as a possible landing spot there. I think it's very interesting. And I continue to be fascinated by this FS1 role in all of this. Whether Julio, he says he didn't know he was being, put on air. If I'm the Falcons, I know this is, maybe in the weeds a little bit, I'm not cooperating with Fox on anything until I get some clearance on this, because if you really think about this for a moment, I'm gonna be on my soapbox for like 5 seconds, and we'll move on and talk about something different. So for those of you who don't know, Shannon Sharpe puts Julio on TV, or if Julio's on the phone, and it's broadcast on TV live, saying that he's out of Atlanta, he wants to go somewhere he can win. You understand the frustration for Julio Jones, I guess, although I would say his contract is part of the reason why the last couple of years the Falcons haven't won. But nonetheless, whether that's true or not, by broadcasting this, making it public, especially if Jones didn't know he was being broadcast, you've now reduced Atlanta's ability to make a good trade for Julio. Because to me, the ultimate source of interest is not where he goes, it's how much Atlanta can get for him. And by having it established that Atlanta is definitely trading him, that Julio Jones has no plans of coming back to the Falcons, all of a sudden the bidding war is not quite going to be up as high as otherwise would be. And the chances of getting something better than a third-round pick for Julio Jones have gone way down because of the assumption that's now out there that FS1 contributed to, that Julio Jones is going to be traded. If I'm the Falcons, I'm upset about this. Even if the world kind of knew they were going to be forced to trade him anyway, you can absolutely say that, in this case, Fox, which owns FS1, has manipulated the story here to make things hard on the Falcons. So when they come crawling around Flowery Branch this summer and want to interview Arthur Smith or Matt Ryan or whatever else, honestly, I hope the PR staff of the Falcons tells them to go kick rocks. I mean, why would you cooperate with a media entity that just hurts your ability to make a trade here? Let's see what else. Mark Abe says, ESPN said this morning that a team has a first-rounder on the table for Julio. Well, we'll see if that's true. As a Falcons fan, I'd love for that to be true. That sort of feels like that might be a plant from inside Flowery Branch, obviously, because if they do truly have a first-round on the table, my guess is that trade would be made pretty quickly. So if that trade does not get made pretty quickly, because do you really see it being a bigger haul than that? The idea of we're going to float there's a first-rounder in hopes that we get something even better on the table. If there truly is a first rounder available for Atlanta for Julio Jones, I think we'll find that out pretty fast, because my guess is the Falcons probably take that trade pretty quick. Brad H says, I want to win thing was about the Cowboys. Let's see what else. Boy, a lot of Julio talk in the YouTube comment section here. Jeremy Barber calls on Keely Ringo to have 5 picks and 2 returns for touchdowns. Boy, Jeremy, that's a big prediction. I love the sound of that. Very good. Yeah, Josh Crafton was not happy with the FS1 part either. Yeah, I think that in this case, FS1's actions actually hurt the Falcons, and I think the Falcons have every right to be mad about that. Let's see what else. Scott Harris says, could a Rick Gilbert have the skill set to fill in for George Pickens while he's out? Here's what I absolutely believe, is that the player on the Georgia roster that a Rick Gilbert most closely compares to is George Pickens, which is not to say that he's definitely going to be as good as Pickens, but I've always felt like that Gilbert from a skill set standpoint probably is a little bit more like a Pickens than he is one of the other tight ends on the roster. This notion, well, you don't really need a Rick Gilbert, you've already got a lot of good tight ends. I don't know that you necessarily even think of a Rick Gilbert as a tight end so much anymore. In fact, one more point about the Falcons here real quick. In kind of a post-Julio Jones world, Kyle Pitts is essentially a wide receiver now for Atlanta, truly and for sure. They'll still be using, what's his name from South Carolina and traditional tight end type stuff. But, Pitts becomes almost like a wide receiver for Atlanta, and Gilbert, wherever he plays, I think is kind of a similar type thing. Stephen Wainwright says, how do you feel about Tim Tebow getting a contract given to him just because he's buddy with the coach? So I have kind of two complicated opinions on this. On the one hand, I'm not as anti-Tebow as some people in the media seem to be. And I'm also, I don't think he really embarrassed himself during his baseball career, right? It's like everybody talks about what a joke that is. He was never making the major leagues. The truth is he's playing AAA baseball and hitting a decent number of home runs after not really being much of a trained baseball player. He's a good athlete, right? I don't think there's any question about that. So this notion that it would be impossible for him to make the 53-man roster, I don't know that I necessarily believe that. I don't think he's obviously a given to do it, and there's a very good chance after such a long time away from football that he's not one of the 53 best players in this roster. But I'm actually fairly impressed with his level of athleticism, even at this stage of his kind of athletic life. However, the one thing, if I was a Jags fan, I'd have a huge issue with. So, like, Trevor Lawrence, your number one overall pick, goes on somebody's podcast or some sort of media thing recently, and he's answering questions about Tim Tebow. And when you head towards like the summer, so much of that chatter is going to be about Tebow because he's such a lightning rod for attention, and you're kind of taking it off what it should be, which is a very expensive head coach, number one overall draft pick. Even like Travis Etienne, another first round pick type situation. These are the guys that ought to be the nucleus for what Jags fans are talking about heading the upcoming season. I just think that Tebow creates an unnecessary distraction there, and I think the conversation for a franchise has been more bound for as long as they have. The idea that now we're talking about Tim Tebow is kind of a sideshow circus act. Even though I'm not anti-Tebow, and I actually think athletically he hasn't really embarrassed himself as much as some of his critics kind of wish he would. I still think this is kind of an unnecessary sideshow around all of that. So I have kind of two different opinions when it comes to Tebow. I think the way in which the Tebow is so hated, this is not Georgia fans hating, a Florida player. This kind of goes beyond that. I think the degree to which Tebow is so hated is just, it's frankly just bizarre. Connor Riley pops into the conversation here.
We'll not be talking about a former quarterback. I do have a question about Arik Gilbert for you, though.
Okay, please.
And this is, again, conjecture. There's some smoke here to this. Given that there's almost no way he's going to be going through summer workouts with whatever school he goes to, because those start next week for most of those programs. It's going to be probably a late July, maybe even an August arrival potentially. Wherever he does go, and let's say it's Georgia, because this is a show for Georgia fans and Georgia Bulldog fans. What kind of impact do you think he has on this 2021 team? Or do you think this is more an impact geared more towards the 2022 season?
Well, I think he'd be a huge player this year.
You have that much belief in him?
I absolutely believe that he could be. Just because I think the skill set, the talent is there. And I do take Terrence seriously when he says, okay, he's not going through summer workouts, but he's working out somewhere, and he's getting stronger, and he's getting better. And yeah, I absolutely think he could be a huge player. And maybe it's not, well, he's a 1,000-yard receiver. Maybe it's he has 3 big games. That's what we kind of forget. In a season in which the margins are so thin sometimes, if he has a big game at the right time, it just changes everything.
Lawrence Cager didn't have, I think, more than 500 yards that season he was at Georgia, and had a huge game against Florida at the right time, made a big play there. One follow-up, and this is super niche Georgia. But let's say he picks Georgia. Are you playing him at the X? Do you even mess with him as a tight end and just say, hey, we like what you bring physically. We have an opening there because the X tends to be the more physical wide receiver position. Do you put him out there and say, hey, we like what we have in our tight end room with Brock Bowers, with Darnell Washington, with John Fitzpatrick?
With all due respect to guys like Darnell Washington, who I think are fantastic, I do think Gilbert compares more favorably physically with George Pickens than he does Darnell Washington. And so, yes, on kind of that short side of the field where, it's a little bit easier throw, you use your body to, to make the catch. I could definitely see Gilbert doing that. And I'll also add to this, this, and for those who may be just kind of joining in, there's obviously no way to know that Gilbert's going to go to Georgia. The reason why we're talking about this is because the rumor mill has seemingly kind of reignited that it's at least a possibility. So we're hypothetically speaking as if it were happening. We don't obviously know that it's going to happen. I want to make sure we're not confusing anybody by the way we're talking about this. But, one of the things that comes up is, we got to have chemistry. You've got to have time working with JT Daniels. I do believe chemistry matters, and I think some Georgia players will benefit from that. But I also think there's something to be said for if you're just really, really talented, whether it's Arian Smith, who's a speedster, or a Rick Gilbert, who's just a big, strong body, if you've got God-given stuff, I think there's a way to use that even if you don't quite have the same level of chemistry that guys have who are maybe getting more chances to work more frequently with JT Daniels, because life is kind of unfair. We weren't all doled out the same stuff at birth, and depending on what you bring to the table, that was kind of simply a gift from God, some of that kind of stuff, it can be used by a guy like Todd Monken, even if you haven't been practicing it all summer.
And I'd point out this stuff can develop kind of quickly, because if you think back to JT last year, he probably during the course of the season when he was working with the scout team wasn't throwing in practice to George Pickens a whole lot. And then sort of the end of the season, obviously there was the weird bye week with the Vanderbilt game getting canceled the first time, and then you play Missouri on the 12th. Out of that, George Pickens and JT Daniels had incredible chemistry, and then you saw it again in the Peach Bowl. So while, yes, it might take some time to get there if Gilbert does come to Georgia, and again, we are nowhere close to this being done. This is sort of just like the fire restarting. It's like when Bane takes the first plane in Dark Knight Rises. But
it's the second Bane reference on the show this week.
So long way to go still here, but a lot of interesting things to think about.
If you'll allow me to, I'll give you – this is my reckless speculation what's going on here, and I have no way of knowing this, but I do like trying to interpret the rumors that are out there. I would say it's fairly obvious that Georgia is trying to recruit a Rick Gilbert.
Yep.
I don't 100% know what Gilbert's response to that is right now.
I think they've always been trying. I've rarely seen it was after the Missouri game where Kirby, I believe, said you can never have enough good tight ends in the SEC. I've never seen him be that outwardly almost blatant about recruiting a specific sort of player. Georgia is good enough, and they're going to make space and find space, and I do believe they have space based on my unofficial count to bring in 2 more players. Last question. Let's say there's only one spot available. Would you rather have Darian Kendrick, who you've tried to speak into existence, or Rick Gilbert?
I got to take Kendrick in that particular situation. I mean, if you're going to force me to that hypothetical, whereas – I mean, you heard Stephen Lasson, and I'm going to take this seriously, National Magazine editor, saying, hey, I like the playmakers that Georgia currently has. No one's going to say that about the Georgia secondary right now. That may be unfair. You may have guys like Amir Speed and others who really blossomed this year, but you're not going to get preseason praise. Listen, I think this Georgia secondary has a chance to be pretty good. You're just not going to get very many national people who say that right now on the basis of what they have going on, which would lead you to believe that cornerback is obviously a much bigger need. So even though Gilbert is one of the most interesting recruits I've ever seen, and he's always been someone as a fan that I wanted at Georgia, if you force me, is it Kendrick or is it Gilbert, I'd have to say it's Kendrick, just simply because he fits a bigger need. However, boy, you don't get too many Rick Gilbert situations, and that's one of the reasons why, when these rumors do blossom back up again, then I perk back up, because I just think he's a story worth following. I do.
One interesting thing on Kendrick. Do you know how many players on Georgia's roster this year have played in a college football playoff game? Current roster.
Ooh, that's a good question. That played in the game or on the roster?
Played in the game.
Ooh. Huh. Boy, I'm struggling to think of somebody. Should I be thinking of somebody?
The answer is 0.
Oh, wow.
The answer is 0. Do you know how many Kendrick has played in? Played, legit, not just played, but started. He has started in at least 3 college
right?
football playoff
the
games.
2 in 2019.
Has an interception in a college football playoff game. Georgia very clearly values experience. That's something that with Darian Kendrick absolutely cannot be ignored.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I liked what Terrence Edwards said about that today, too, of, listen – and I think sometimes people misinterpret me on this, that when I say I like giving guys second chances, that means I'm willing to tolerate anything as long as you can play the game. That's not quite the same thing as what I'm saying. But for a young man who wants to learn from this past, wants to get better, then I want football to be a part of his life. We are very, very slow to condemn around here. It doesn't mean that there's times in which the concoction, the chemistry in your locker room is going to be somehow messed up and you can't make certain moves. I understand all of that. But listen, there's a way to allow football to be a real catalyst for positive change in people's life, and I'm all for that when it has a chance. So watching Kendrick closely. One more thing about Gilbert, then I'll take a bunch more comments. I know what some people are going to say in the comment section. I want to head this off the pass. Too much drama with Gilbert. Too much drama. I'm tuned out on Eric Gilbert. People don't like the drama. And I understand why they don't. I got to say this one more time, though. If there is drama around a Rick Gilbert, it is not caused by a Rick Gilbert. A Rick Gilbert is not on social media all the time, saying, I might do this and I might do that. I mean, you got certain recruits, and listen, I got no problem with, guys who want to do this. Because if I was young and had big following, I'd probably do the same thing. But you got, guys who are like, hey, where my Dog fans at? Or, hey, where's my Texas A&M Aggies, fans at? You got certain recruits that do like to kind of keep a lot of fan bases involved in their story. Rick Gilbert is fairly content to be kind of quiet about his business there. Privately speaking with Terrence Edwards and, using him for counsel, it sounds like, based on what Terrence said a little earlier. But for the most part, Rick Gilbert is not cultivating drama in all of this. There is drama around his decision because he's a very good player, and he would really crown a team that he played for, especially if that's another SEC team, or even staying in LSU would be kind of a big deal. So let's just really make sure we understand this, that the drama around the Gilbert recruitment, for the most part, is not really it is not really caused by Gilbert. He went to a school, decided he didn't like it, wanted to transfer. That's not abnormal in 2021 to want to do that. Then there's this issue of, well, maybe academically it just makes more sense for me to stay where I am. And, that's almost like a compromise, right? You could see that as, well, it's not really what I want to do, but it may be what I have to do. Well, maybe it's not what I have to do. Like, to me, that's not drama. That's just, a guy working through his process. And now if you want to bang me for saying, well, BA, you're the one that's always kind of criticizing the transfer portal, now you're trying to use it. I'm more than happy to wear that, hypocritical hat, because my theory on this is, even though I don't like interconference transfers, or even though I'm not super bullish on the idea of the transfer portal, if it does exist, I want Georgia to use it. I'm more than happy to be considered a hypocrite on that. But in terms of saying that Gilbert is cultivating this drama, I don't personally see that. All right, let's see what else. Mike Tiffany says that Gilbert did cause the drama. Yeah, I mean, I guess, Mike, you're going to be harder on him than I am for deciding he wasn't happy with the school that he went to. I mean, here's the thing, Mike, and when you're being recruited and all these schools are telling you all this stuff, I mean, it's just easy to kind of buy into the wrong thing, right? It's like you go to LSU because the year before they'd been the hot school, going that far from home, deciding you don't like it. I mean, that's not, Rick Gilbert's certainly not the only one who's ever dealt with a situation like that. So it sounds like you're going to be a little harder on him than I'm going to be for deciding he made the wrong choice as far as the school that he attended. Hayes Calloway says, my birthday this week. Happy birthday to you, Hayes. Congratulations and happy birthday. All right, let's see what else. I got to go back over to YouTube for a second. We'll come back over to Facebook here, too, in a little bit. Jordan Bowman on the subject of Darian Kendrick. Yeah, I played some of the clips from that Kendrick interview yesterday. I actually watched the whole thing. It's an hour long. And, I did learn a lot about Darian Kendrick that I didn't know there. And, listen, he's got some stuff to figure out. There's no doubt about that. And I hope, whether he goes to Georgia or not, I hope that he does. Because this is one of those things, like, I'm not trying to be a blowout. I really do believe this. That if you are of, like, the ultra, 1% of 1% in football talent, because you think about it, the only football players we ever talk about on this show are like the uber talented. They are in the 1% of the 1%. They are literally like, the 99.99999 percentile of players. If you've got that kind of talent and then you have, kind of some off-field issues, the idea that somehow your life could get better by ignoring the thing that you have otherworldly talent in, that's just not a very good recipe for success. So I want guys who have a chance to be elite at football to have football in their life as much as they possibly can, because to me it's the pathway through all of that, which ultimately they end up having a better, happier, more enjoyable life. So whether Kendrick goes to Georgia or not, I hope that he's able to kind of figure out whatever it is that he has going on. It sounds like, even going back to his time at Clemson, he had some family issues that he was trying to work through and deal with. Sounds like one of his kids was sick, and at least based on the context from the interview that I played some clips from. And like I said, I hope he gets all that figured out, because football can be a real gateway for him into an enjoyable life if he can. G. Gray Spam Boy says Kendrick has all the right physical to be great, fast, and aggressive on the field. Yeah, I mean, he's a big-time athlete, right? I mean, he was 5-star prospect. Obviously came into Clemson famously as a wide receiver, but a deep cornerback now. And, he owned the fact he didn't play well against Ohio State. But, listen, it's like how many of these NFL corners, every now and then you just get beat, right? I mean, we've always talked about the idea of a short memory. Every now and then with these teams that throw the way they do now and they just, kind of come back, swing for the fences over and over again, you're going to get beat every now and then. He didn't run away from that. Bank 6, who was, by the way, our golden shoe winner from today, said our corners will benefit from having that front seven. I hope that's true, Bank, because it certainly should be. Robert Barnes said being happy didn't have anything to do with Gilbert leaving his team last year. He got behind and opted out instead of getting benched. I don't know that he was heading towards getting benched, but maybe I don't know as much about that situation as you do, though. By the way, Robert is one of those guys that has officially migrated. One time prolific Facebook commenter, now I would say exclusively on YouTube. That's a pretty big migration. Frank Patterson says, what's the over-under on how many targeting calls Lewis Singh gets this year? I hope not too many, but he does play the game physically. Yeah, that's one of those things where, I obviously love the Greg Blue era. Thomas Davis, especially because Davis was a big-time player. And, I appreciate the physical part of the game. I understand why some of the rules have been changed, but I do appreciate the physical part of the game, and I do love the way that Singh plays with that physical edge to him. And at the same time, you're like, boy, we got to keep this guy on the field there too. So you want him bringing that edge, kind of plays the steel chair in his hand, but you also kind of you got to try to figure out a way to keep him on the field there too. That's not an easy thing to do these days. All right, let's see what else. Jeremy Barber says he thinks George could be the best front seven in all of college football. I would agree with that. Tristan West says some of us forget our own state of mind when we were in early 20s. That was without Twitter, YouTube. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's part of my mindset on all of that as well. Let's see what else. Mike D says on YouTube they don't give away hats. Obviously, famously, Facebook has given away some hats, and I even have one of those Top Fan hats. He says we just we just have jokes and hard times over here. That's really funny from Mike D. Really funny. Jay Shipes also mentioning Bakari Rambo there as well, and that's a good one to mention. All right, let's do a couple more on Facebook, then we got to go. Matt Rukavina, by the way, a little shot across the bow to YouTube saying, tell those YouTubers I live in their heads much longer. I'm going to have to start charging rent. Very funny. Very funny. Yeah, I really don't quite understand what Matt has done to get people as stirred up on YouTube. I also, for some reason, it's really funny to me when Facebookers and YouTubers mention the other person's name. I don't know why that's funny to me, but it just kind of is. Randy Hall says this recruiting class seems so mature. It really does. Between Jalen Walker, Malachi Starks, Branson Robinson, what a locker room. Yeah, and obviously, we're going to make some presuppositions about Branson Robinson being a part of it. But let me tell you something. Those are mature guys. I mean, that's sort of, that's like the deacons at your church. I mean, they just sort of sit around very mature sounding, very, very, polished, sharp guys, future team captain types. I didn't quite know as much about Branson Robinson from that vein until I watched this interview, but I was really, really impressed with him. Very impressed. And I already feel that way about Walker and Malachi Starks. Just really, really sharp dudes. And it is kind of funny, and I do think, now we're going to get ready to wrap up after this. I think that when you're Georgia, and Georgia's not the only school that's like this, but they're a couple, two or three, that have such recruiting prowess that not only, most schools are in this situation where if you are talented enough to play, then you will tolerate a lot of baggage because it's just hard to find guys who meet the athletic threshold of being able to play at this level. And so you're willing to tolerate a lot. But when you're Georgia, all of a sudden you're recruiting at such a level that even within the category of 5 stars, you start looking for the 5 stars among the 5 stars. And that differentiator is not about athletic talent because at the 5-star level, pretty much everybody has the look of a future first-round pick. It's about the intangible qualities, the off-field stuff. How do you carry yourself? Do you have the potential to be a future team captain type guy? And that's what's really fun with Georgia. For those of you that really follow this stuff closely and watch all the interviews that Jeff does or learn as much about the recruits as you can, is that Georgia's now amongst this kind of like 5-star category, getting pretty, and a very high 4-star, of course, too, getting pretty selective about the players that they're even going after in there. And, these guys carry themselves well in interviews, and they have, ideas what they want their future to be. And when you have the athletic requisite skills to go along with that kind of unique perspective off the field, boy, that can really be a nice connection there all the way around. That's a really fun thing to be able to see. Thank you so much for being here with us today on our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all make sure you check out R.S. Andrews. It's going to be hot again today. I've got the pullover in here, but I'll take it off after the show's done. 90 degrees. We're approaching that once again today. So make sure you get your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Let R.S. Andrews take good care of you on that. Find them online, rsandrews.com. They will get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. You can find them today, rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. See you back here tomorrow. Don't forget, no show on Monday, but still normal for tomorrow, and then back again after that on Tuesday. So we'll see you then. Dog Nation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. For more Dog Nation videos, check out youtube.com/DogNation.